I wonder if there are not quite a few of us who are struggling to sleep at night, especially facing the kind of things that are happening around us. When that happens to me, and it doesn't actually happen to me too often, but when that happens to me, one of the things that is often common, sometimes the cause, is that there is a line or a bit of a song repeating in my head. People call it an earworm sometimes. And it could be anything. It could be something behind a TV show. It could be something from the radio or I've heard in the house. It could be something that I'm working on with other people to record a song together, and I've just heard it so many times. And at that moment, especially in the dark and in the middle of the night, the last thing I need is to have that stuck on a loop and hear that song or that bit of the song again. Mary, Zechariah, Elizabeth. Who are they? Well, Mary is a teenager in the first century who's been told by an angel that she's going to have an extra special baby happening in a really unusual way, and this baby will somehow be the Son of God, who'll be part of putting the world back together. Zechariah is an old man, a priest in the temple, who's been silenced after having learned that he is going to be a father to a son who is going to be called John, and who's going to somehow make things ready, be part of what Mary's son will be doing. Elizabeth is his wife, pregnant despite being way past childbearing age, and hearing that somehow she is part of what God is doing in putting things back together. And here we listen to a time when Elizabeth meets her much, much younger relative Mary somewhere on the outskirts of a city called Jerusalem. We are hearing the story of a writer, a man we call Luke. And he collects together, shapes one of the 4 stories we have of the life and the death and the resurrection of a young Jewish teacher called Jesus of Nazareth. There's another 30 weeks before Jesus of Nazareth will even be born. But here at the beginning of his story, Luke wants his listeners to understand that these are important people and facts. He's writing a story of all different kinds, but behind it is a history. He's writing about real people in real places at a real moment in human history in the first century in the ancient Near East. But at the same time, as we're seeing, he's an artist, he's a storyteller. He's inspired, and so he's laying things out to get across how he feels. And we know that he feels excited. Zechariah's excited, Elizabeth's excited, Mary's excited. There's leaping, there's shouting, and there's singing. Why is everyone excited? The story hasn't even really got going. Well, it seems that Luke is excited because he wants us to know that God is already at work. Elizabeth's baby leaps, and Elizabeth's baby is going to grow up to be a man called John. We'll call him John the Baptizer because of what he does. The baby leaps inside her womb, and this isn't just hiccups. This is a sign that God's at work, and that's what Luke means when he talks about the Holy Spirit, God's breath, wind, presence being involved. God is at work. The baby leaps, and Elizabeth shouts at the top of her voice, talking about Mary and how blessed her situation is. And Mary, this young teenager from the back end of nowhere, breaks here into a song. You might wonder if Mary is spontaneously responding with the song, and that may be. She's definitely excited, bursting in her response. But at the same time, this young teenager has walked 70 miles to get here, so plenty of time to be working on a song that she can't get out of her head. And what a song it is. There's almost no words in this song that aren't a direct quote or a reference to something in the great Jewish songbook of the time or the prophets. A big chunk of our song comes from a song that Hannah sings and is recorded for us in a book called 1 Samuel. And the rest of it are all sorts of bits and pieces from their songs in the Psalms or their prophets, God's messages of hope. And this is not an accident. Mary is, on the one hand, naturally using these words because they're the words stuck in her head from her childhood, the songs that she's grown up with. But more than that, Luke is also putting his story into a bigger story. This is not something new or weird. This is part of a much bigger story. In fact, it's just the next chapter, a critical chapter, but part of the ongoing story of God and his people, God's creation project, a story about how God is recognizing always what is going on with this project, and he is working to put that back together. This section, Mary's song, is sometimes called the Magnificat, which comes from the Latin translation and what would have been the first word. My soul glorifies or magnifies, it would have been the first word of the song. And her song is fascinating in its shape in that she starts talking about herself, a young teenager from the back end of nowhere who giving thanks because somehow God is using her to be part of this. But then her song expands and talks about something bigger, her people, the Jewish people, being what they were made to be and part of what God is doing through these people. Turning things upside down, because then it expands even more to the promises given to those people that are for the whole of creation, to all nations, to all creatures. She sings about the proud and the rulers. What happens to them? Well, they're scattered and they're brought down. She sings of the humble and the poor and the hungry. And what happens to them? They're lifted up and filled with good things. This is a song about turning things upside down. This is a song full of metaphors and symbols and quotes and maybe not necessarily to be taken absolutely literally, because this could be a song about, right, the rich at the moment are going to become poor and the poor at the moment are going to become rich. But let's think, what help would that be to the whole project? You end up with the same amount of rich and the same amount of poor. No, this is about a God who is working to put all things to rights, to bring justice, mercy, hope, fulfillment of promises, revolution, rescue to his whole creation project. And that will turn some things upside down, but the aim is not revenge, not payback, it's about wholeness. This is a song about revolution, but not about swapping the current empire for just a new Jewish empire. Who needs another empire? This is a song, a story about putting God's creation project back on track. This is a song about a God who made his creation and his creatures to partner in bringing the whole project to, here's that word again, fulfillment, to reach its potential, to be what it was made to be. And the empires of Luke's day, of Mary's day, had a warped view of that seemed to be about grabbing power, about focusing on yourself, about hoarding wealth, about consuming experiences, about exploiting the creation, the creatures, even the peoples around. That kind of empire has been repeated and is strangely familiar to us today. This song is about a God who wants to get rid of those lies, those misconceptions, those half-truths, that fake news, those fake promises, and get rid of everything that gets in the way and threatens this whole creation project. And somehow the life and death and resurrection of this Jesus of Nazareth is critical to that. These two babies, John and Jesus, not even born, will be a part of that story. And so is Zechariah, and so is Elizabeth, and so is Mary who's singing, and so am I, and so are you. Mary sings, not because this is the start of something new and weird, but this is actually part of what has already happened and is happening and will happen, because that's how sure she is. That's how sure Luke is that this God keeps his promises. Which is why she sings about God's power, God's mercy, God's love, God's faithfulness. Elizabeth started it with her shout when she said, "Blessed are you who's trusted that the Lord would fulfill his promises." Mary's song is not just a song of hope, it's a song of trust. Trust in a God who is at work. If Luke's story was a song, it didn't just have these songs in it, and it had a chorus to get stuck in your head, this would be the chorus. By the end of our time with Luke, you may be sick of hearing again and again and again that this is a God who keeps his promises, that this is a God who is at work, that this is a God who gets involved. This is a God who wants people like you and me to be part of it. That's what he made us for. And that this God can be trusted. Enough. Enough, Luke, we get it. We don't need to hear it again, you might think. But do I get it? Do I remember it? Do we get it? Or do we need to hear it again and again?